Executive Director of our SEEDS program we have here at Abiding Savior. And I have Lauren, who's one of my therapists here, and she's going to talk to you tonight about social media and technology, and she's gonna introduce herself, but afterwards we'll open it up for questions, and we'll end with me sharing a little bit about our SEEDS program at the end. So here is Lauren.
Hello everyone, my name is Lauren Spraker. I am an associate marriage and family therapist. I recently graduated from Vanguard University with my graduate's degree in clinical psychology. I did my traineeship at Concordia University, where I was able to work one-on-one with the college students there, providing psychotherapy and telehealth counseling throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. I was recently taken on the SEEDS team at Abiding Savior, where I have had the privilege of working one-on-one with the students on campus, teaching social skills such as body language, active listening, and how to hold a conversation. Other topics, we teach about bullying and how to manage and respond to that. More importantly, I want to let you know that I am a mother of 2 daughters. I have a 4.5-year-old and a 6.5-month-old. And I think it's important to highlight that as I talk about social media and its effects on our mental health. I need you to know that I am right in the middle of that fight with you, both as a social media consumer myself and as a mom. So before we dive in and talk about our kiddos, I think it's a good time to stop for a moment and think about ourselves as the adults and our own personal experiences with social media and the internet. So think back to your life prior to the internet. What was your life like prior to having a phone, and how did it change once you got a phone? When did you get a smartphone with internet on it? How old were you? And how did that make things different? I was thinking about myself and my own experiences. I did not receive a phone until 2003. I was 15 years old and I was a freshman in high school. Now, my phone did not have internet, but I did have the privilege of being able to text all my friends whenever I wanted, in school, in class, at home, in the car, and as a teenage girl, this was amazing, right? And at the time, we were using T9, so you had to click every number 2 to 3 times to get the letter you wanted on the screen, but still, it was awesome. Around the same time, I would get home from high school, run and grab a snack, and then run up to my parents' room to log into their computer and get on AOL Instant Messenger, where I would begin to chat with my friends that I just spoke or was just hanging out with all day at high school until my parents would call me downstairs for dinner. Now, it wasn't until I was 22 years old when I received my first smartphone. This is the same time that Instagram came out, and let me tell you, you could not pull my face out of that app. And the Instagram at that time was so much more simple, night and day, compared to the Instagram that we have today. So let's get really real here. And I want to ask you, do you know what your daily average screen time is every day? Did you know that you could find this out on your phone by going to the settings and clicking on the screen time? Your phone actually will tell you how much time you spend on the phone every week. Now, I'll be honest, as a 33-year-old, I spend an average of 3 hours, and 9 minutes every day staring at that little screen. That means that my kids watch me for 3 hours a day looking at my phone. Um, so, mind you, I'm not on social media for 3 hours a day anymore, but I do use my phone for various reasons. But this is still a lot of time to be spending on a phone. Dr. Jean Twenge is a researcher of generations, and she says that the most observable difference in people born before 1995 and after 1995 is the fundamental shift in how we are spending our leisure time. So listen to this progression in this timeline. The first iPhone came out in 2007. By 2012, the majority of Americans owned a smartphone. These phones, as we know, were made popular by their access to internet, and even more so due to their access to social media platforms such as Facebook and Snapchat, to name just two of them. By 2017, 69% of adults were using social media compared to only 5% using it in 2005. And by 2018, 95% of United States adolescents had access to a smartphone, and 45% of them said that they were online almost constantly. Now consider this statistic. Today, the average age to receive a smartphone is 10 years old. This is 5 years younger than when I received my not-so-smartphone. Now imagine yourself as a 10-year-old and think back to what you were doing, or rather, what were you playing, and then imagine someone hands you an iPhone, and now what are you doing? Probably gonna be on your phone. So remember, I told you that I spend an average of 3 hours on my phone. Twenge states that as of 2017, the average 17 to 18-year-old spent more than 6 hours of their leisure time on interactive social media. So that basically means that if they were not sleeping, eating, or in school, they're browsing their phone. So why do we care? Why should we even be concerned what people are doing with their leisure time? Why do we care what our teens are doing with their leisure time? There's been a lot of research on smartphones and our use of social media, and unfortunately when it comes to our mental health, there are more research is showing that there's more cons than pros to having this sort of media. Now I'm going to read off some statistics. I don't want them to scare you. The fact that you are listening today shows that you care and you want to help your children. So from 2005 to 2017, the rate of adolescents reporting symptoms of major depression in a given year has increased by 52%, and 63% in adults ages 18 to 25. The suicide rate for adolescent girls in particular has increased by 63%, and self-harm by girls ages 10 to 14 has nearly tripled. And these numbers are increasing. Child suicide rates have increased by up to 150%. And as I mentioned before, by 2017, the average 12th grader spent more than 6 hours of leisure time on their phone. Studies show that teens who spend 3 hours a day or more on electronic devices are 35% more likely to have a risk factor for suicide, such as making a suicide plan. Since 2007, the homicide rate among teens has declined, but the suicide rate has increased. As teens have started spending less time together, they become less likely to kill one another and more likely to kill themselves. This may lead you to ask, if social media and our phones are having these harmful effects on our mental health, why do we keep going back to them? And the answer is this: social media is addictive, and the masterminds behind these platforms have designed them to be this way. So, Dr. Victoria Dunkley, she is a child psychiatrist who is also recognized nationally as an expert on the impact of screen time on brain health and development. She has found that while viewing screens, you can see on brain scans that there is an increased release of dopamine. In fact, while video gaming, there is such a big release of this feel-good chemical that brain scans actually are comparable to cocaine use. And like drug use, when reward pathways are overused, they become less sensitive, requiring the need for more and more stimulation in order to experience the same amount of pleasure. I'm going to read off some more statistics, and these are interesting. They tell us, they kind of hint to why it has been so hard for us to put down our phones. While in person, people talk about themselves around 30 to 40% of the time. When on social media, however, people talk about themselves upwards of 80% of the time. When we receive a positive notification on something that we have posted, most likely about ourselves, we receive a slight surge of dopamine. This feel-good sensation rewards the behavior associated with social media, thus perpetuating the habit of using it. A poll found that 94% of its participants reported feeling troubled when they did not have their phone, 80% of them were jealous when someone else used their phone, and 70% expected to feel depressed, panicked, and helpless if their phone was missing. Another study found that 89% of undergraduate students experience what is called phantom vibrations. This is the perception of vibrations from a mobile device that is not vibrating. This tells us that people crave receiving notifications so much that they start imagining them. Now, we have talked about adolescents and how they are struggling, but parents, we are giving iPads to our 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. We are facilitating this sort of dependence before our babies even know how to play or interact with other children. It only makes sense why a possible 3-year-old addict responds with a tantrum when we pull that iPad out of their little hands. So parents, we have some work to do. We came to talk about our kids tonight, but the reality is that this is now a struggle that we are all facing at all ages. That means that as adults and parents, not only do we have to break our own bad habits, but we have to step in and better shepherd our own children. If you are like me, setting limits around your child's screen time can be daunting. Pulling my 4-year-old off of her iPad often feels like I'm about to go into the fighting ring and I need to arm her up because I'm about to take a hit. But when I think about it through the lens of her possibly developing addiction to these things, it makes me more motivated to step in and help her. It's another factor that has helped me parent my children through screen time is the fact that their brains are not fully developed yet, and they do not have the same signals as a developed adult brain. Adults think using their prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that helps us respond to situations with good judgment and awareness of long-term consequences. However, this part of your brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. That means that our children and our teens do not have this function yet. They want what they want, when they want it, and they have no sight of the consequences at all. Having this in mind helps me understand my children's meltdowns. She does not have the same signals at me that say, hey, maybe I should do something else now. Therefore, I have to tell her. Our teens also need us to stand up to their fight. Until there is a mandated warning label like there is on cigarette boxes and alcohol, we need to caution them. Viewing social media may be hazardous to your health. So where do we start? How you decide to parent your screen time will be and should be different for every family. Every family is unique, and so are your kids. Therefore, I do not have a one-size-fits-all strategy that you can take home and begin implementing tonight. However, I thought of some simple takeaways that I think everyone can consider. How you decide to parent screen time largely depends on the age of your children and how much social media they are already routined and used to using. As I go through these suggestions, bear in mind what your current situation is with your children and how it may or may not apply to you. So the first point I have is hold out. To those who have not yet given your children a phone, my first suggestion is that you consider not giving them one for as long as possible. This may seem a bit extreme, given the fact that everyone has one. However, you have to realize that yes, everyone has one, but we did not know what we know now. Take yourself back to your childhood again. You did not have social media, and you were okay. Some thoughts on this. One, it is okay for your kids to be bored. I'm going to say that again. It is okay for your kids to get a little bored sometimes, for it is out of boredom that interactive play is born. Once your kids learn how to play and begin independently exercising creativity, their boredom will become less of an inconvenience to you. But they have to be a little bored first. Consider encouraging them to invite friends over to play. Consider the toys that your child has. Quality toys are open-ended and battery-free. The more the toy does for your child, the less the child has to think for themselves and imagine. If we want our children to play independently, the types of toys we provide will actually make a difference. Some examples of quality toys are blocks, Play-Doh, dough or figurines, jump rope, dodgeball, probably things that you had when you were a kid. Lastly, if you are really concerned about your child's safety, as my parents were for me when I started playing sports in high school, then consider giving them a dumb phone, i.e. a phone without internet. They actually still exist. My second point is educate your kids. When the time comes and you have decided to give your child a smartphone, take the time to talk to them about the ins and outs of the internet. Teach them about the different forms of media available and show them how to use it and how to present themselves appropriately on these platforms. Jonathan McKee from Focus on the Family compares handing your phone to a child to handing them the keys to the car and not teaching them the rules of the road, not practicing with them, and just expecting them to be okay. So before we hand them the phone, like we sit next to them while practicing being on the road, before we hand our babies the phone, we need to first sit with them and show them how to use social media. Like we narrate how to drive, we need to talk to them about what they may see online and create a safe space for them to talk to us about how different posts they see online may be making them feel. My third point is set boundaries and clearly communicate them. As I mentioned prior, every household will and should have different rules for screen time. Talk to your spouse about these rules so that you are both clear on them and agree to be on the same page. Here are a couple that I have thought up. The first boundary you get to set with your child is the age in which they get to have a phone. You are the parent, culture is not. Decide on the age they will receive a phone and talk to them about why you have made this decision. Think about the rules you will have surrounding screen time and/or the phone use, and make sure that it is understood prior to handing them this technology. One rule that I suggest to all families is no screens allowed in the bedroom ever. This includes laptops, TVs, and iPads. My parents always told me nothing good ever happens at nighttime, and this applies to phones as well. Nothing good happens on your phone at night. Phones should be kept on a family charging dock where all devices are held until morning. Consider setting times where phones are allowed and times when phones are not allowed. For example, are phones allowed at the dinner table? Are phones allowed when you're going to visit grandma? Normalize your involvement with your child's screen activity. Ask them about what apps they like. Ask them what they enjoy using their phones for. Do they play games? Are they watching YouTube videos? And educate yourself in these things. Not only will this show that you are interested in your child, but it will also enable you to be aware of where your child is spending time online. My last point is connect before disconnecting. To the parents who are concerned about their child's gaming or social media use, it may be time to consider an electronic fast. This may sound impossible, but you are the parent and you can do this. Dr. Victoria Dunkley has a great book that provides information on this. She also has a website. She suggests implementing a 3 to 4 week break from electronics. In her own practice as a psychiatrist, she has seen this intervention lead to, as I quote, deeper sleep, a brighter and more steady mood, better focus and organization, and an increase in physical activity. She has observed that many of her clients gained a better ability to tolerate stress, which also led to less frequent and less severe meltdowns. She states that if done correctly, children begin to enjoy the things they used to, are more drawn to nature, and imaginary or creative play returns. In teens and young adults, an increase in self-directed behavior is observed, the exact opposite of apathy and hopelessness. Now, while I agree with Dr. Dunkley's electronic fast, I want to highlight this thought to parents of teens. Do not take away your child's electronics without first sitting down with them and having a sincere explanation of your heart behind doing so. Make sure that you are taking away electronics during a time when you are fully available to your child. You cannot disconnect them from this world and then abandon them. Connect with your kids before you disconnect them. This separation will be hard for them, and it is important that you are with them and along the way and a support to them. I will end with these two last quotes. The first one is by Helen Boy Guess, founder and president of the Reboot Foundation. She says, "It's time we started treating social media for what it is, an addictive activity with serious health implications. Detoxifying from social media will require commitment on several different levels: regulatory, educational, and individual. Ultimately, this challenge has become an opportunity to prioritize mental health and clear thinking, and to cherish our most precious gift of all, our minds." And lastly, this was said anonymously: "You cannot upload love, you cannot download time. You can't Google all of life's answers, you must actually live some of your life." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren. I don't know if we have any questions online. Would we have questions, Donna, or no?
I'd just like to say a couple words. I have actually seen in our student body addictive students to their iPhones. And it truly is an issue that we need to be aware of, we need to address, and we need to take seriously. And I like what you said about, you just can't yank it away when they are adolescents, because they are now truly addicted. So we have to be there to support them. I really liked what you said about no electronics in the bedroom. That's key too. And as I get to see different correspondence, because I have certain security in place for our students, it is interesting that a lot of the correspondence that I see that I shouldn't see happens in the middle of the night. So that is so key to make sure that it is not in the bedroom. So thank you. Thank you for saying those things. There were no questions online at this time. I will go back and check one more time.
Vicky had a question.
Should I put the speaker too?
Thank you for your presentation. It was very enlightening. Quick question just about the stats that you read and the amount of time that people spend on social media, especially or on their smart devices, I think it was. And obviously, people are using those for all sorts of things these days, including, Fitbits when they're running or exercising, and people watch or listen to music on those. It's taken the place of their stereos. So do you know if those stats are inclusive of those kind of activities where you're really not using that? It's being used in lieu of a stereo in the home or something like that. Do you know?
Yeah, so I believe that stat is, there's two different forms of media. There's passive, which is more like watching TV, and then there's interactive. And this statistic is referring to interactive, which is anything that gives you feedback, is talking to you, you are involved in pushing buttons, and unfortunately it can be from even your running app as it's talking to you and saying, hey, look at you, you did this, you ran 4 miles today, good job. Or, even just, you're on Spotify and you're listening to a song, but in the background, sometimes there is a music video playing, and that is all interactive. So it really just depends, but I believe that statistic is referring to interactive specifically.
There is a question. If you could list some of the books that you got.
Yes. So the first one is by Victoria Dunkley. She is the specialist in detoxing from social media. I think it's mostly she has a full book that lays out how to do this correctly. It's called Reset Your Child's Brain. Let's see. I should put these online for everybody. The second one that I have listed is called iGen, and this refers to everyone born after the year 1995, so children raised on electronics. This is the first generation to always have had social media, often given iPads at 2 years old. This book is the first book to document the cultural changes shaping today's teens and young adults, documenting how their changed world has impacted their attitudes, worldviews, and mental health. And this is by Jean M. Twenge, whom I got most of these statistics from. She's also the studier of generations, so she studies the shifts as decades go by and sees how those changes affect the group. This last book I have here is Jonathan McKee. He's the one from Focus on the Family, and he writes this book called Parenting Generation Screen. And so he offers families strategies for addressing screen time issues with the children and teens that are based in Scripture, as he is a believer. One of my personal favorites that I added on here, that I actually went through this program myself, I found her on Instagram, ironically, at Jerica Sannes, that is Sannes. Her website is raisewildflowers.com. This is my favorite resource. She talks about quality toys, which toys are not the best, and how to declutter your children's play rooms. Keep in mind, my oldest is 4.5, so I don't know how much this applies to teens. She also talks about different types of media. So, for example, I deleted YouTube from my child's iPad. It was just too much. It was too much unsupervised activity. She was just hopping around to everything, like spending 10 seconds on each video before she'd hop to the next one. And before you know it, she's in some hole watching something that is really weird. And I just found that through following her stuff that wasn't good for us. And she also talks about, she started homeschooling, so she just has a lot of different stuff that was developed out of her experience through the pandemic with her children.
And we can also send over a copy of these resources to Mrs. Lucas, and we can have it put in the bullhorn, just so you guys have that. Another one that I know is really great is Parenting in the Digital World. It's not on our list. We can add it to the list before we send it out. It's written by this man who does cyber safety cop. He was I believe he was working with the sheriff's department here. He's done a lot of speaking engagements. He's phenomenal. But if you're looking too of like what to say and what to be aware of, Parenting in the Digital World is great. And I think he constantly updates it with new information, and you can get that included. You go on his website and his listserv, and it's a really awesome resource too, is what I've heard a lot about. So, any other questions, Donna? So I want to thank Lauren for presenting today. I think it's a great topic that we all need to be educated on. And like I said, I'm Rebecca Kindreich. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I worked at Concordia University for 17 years. I was the director of the psychological counseling services at Concordia for the last 12 years that I was there. But when I started in 2003, I think we had a part-time director and 2 part-time staff, me being one of them. And when I left this May, we had 9 therapists there, and we still had a wait list. So things have drastically changed from 2003 to 2020, 21. And that was even with 60% of our dorms not being there last year. So, or only having 60% of our dorms full. So mental health is unfortunately on the rise. And being a mom and having 3 kiddos here at Abiding Savior, it just made me start thinking about the mental health for the young ones, and I started doing some research because more and more parents here at Abiding Savior would come and talk to me knowing that I was a licensed clinical social worker and asking for support and advice. And as I was doing some research, CDC did a study last year, or in March 2020, they compared March 2020 to October 2020 compared to March 2019 to October 19, and ages 5 to 11, the hospitalizations for people going to the hospital, not necessarily getting admitted, but getting checked out for mental health from 5 to 11-year-olds had increased 24% from 2019 to 2020, and for 12 to 17-year-olds, 31%. So things are increasing, unfortunately, in the young kids. And, you know, it was a normal thing at the university level for me to see students, unfortunately, struggling with mental health, whether it was significant mental health, which a lot of it was, but some of it was just basic life skills that they hadn't learned. And so one of the things we're doing with the SEEDS program for the young ones is trying to do some prevention and just teaching them, how do you interact with one another? What is it like to have a relationship with one another? So the groups we're running are really life skills. We're not doing therapy in those groups. We do offer therapy in individual sessions, and I haven't really advertised for any of that because we are really focused on the groups. But we have a number of students in individual now, and we have a couple that are 5 years old all the way up. So, I mean, it's even the little ones that are sort of needing it, and we do play therapy in the nursery, and it's been really good. But we will be offering more groups in January, and also individual counseling. So if you're interested in individual counseling, feel free to reach out to the school office. You can email me directly. My information's in there. So, and we have stuff in the bullhorn all the time too. I think that is it, yes? So we are good. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. Please email